You are listening to the Paranormal Chronicles radio show. Here is your host, paranormal researcher and author of the best-selling A Most Haunted House, Gavin Lee Davis.
Welcome, my name is G.L. Davis, author of the international #1 best-selling Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest and founder of the ParanormalChronicles.com. Welcome to our Bigfoot episode in our ongoing journey exploring all things supernatural and spiritual. Our series is brought to you by sick-books.com, and Sick-Books is your first stop for all your reading on the paranormal, the spiritual, and the unexplained. This month, sick-books.com's featured books are The Foreseeable Future by Gary Williams, which explores the phenomena of foresight and prophecy, and Evolutionary Metaphors by David J. Moore, as he unearths some stunning new research into the UFO enigma. Visit www.sick-books.com for more info. Make sure all our listeners press follow for this podcast for your chance to win some cool paranormal books in our monthly followers giveaway. It's easy to enter, press follow, and each month you could win a book just for listening and following. How easy is that? Enjoy our previous episodes as we present content on ancient human spacefaring research, UFO sightings, ghost accounts, and so much more. On tonight's show, does the Bigfoot creature exist? Are they dangerous? What do they really look like? And can humans live with this enigmatic creature? In 2014, I was honoured to be invited by former law enforcement officer and paranormal broadcaster Dave Dominguez from El Paso, Texas, as he interviewed a man that has not only seen Bigfoot, heard Bigfoot, but interacted with a Bigfoot on numerous occasions. The witness, Keith Bearden, would go on to write an incredible, critically acclaimed book called Forest Friends of the Night, which was an in-depth insight to his day-to-day interaction with a Bigfoot that lived in and around his land. His book was simply one of the best books I had read on the subject. So, here on this episode, you can listen to that full hour-long, incredible, in-depth interview as he describes the most amazing Bigfoot evidence you may ever hear. If you have a story, theory, or experience you'd like to share, then message us on Facebook or Instagram at The Paranormal Chronicles, on Twitter at Parachron, or email us at paranormalchronicles@aol.com. On with the show.
Thank you very much for joining us on the Paranormal Chronicles Radio Network, Keith. We have Keith Bearden on, the author of course, Forest Friends of the Night, My True Story of the Discovery of the Bigfoot People. Welcome aboard, Keith. Good to have you.
Thank you. Good to be here, guys. Well, it all happened by accident, or maybe not accident. It all happened when I was hunting. I have a family tract of land that I hunt on here in Georgia in the United States, and we began having some really weird things start happening. We would have weird howls at night that I couldn't explain away. I was born and raised here, hunted since I was a little bitty guy, 6 or 7 years old with my dad. So I'm very familiar with all the creatures here, all the animals that I've grown up hearing. And we started hearing things that I'd never, ever heard before. It was a very loud, piercing screams that would start out very low and get higher and higher. Heard those at night several times. We heard some things in the daytime. But the odd things were the camper shaking at night. That happened to my mom and dad. They were down there and sleeping in a truck camper, and it began to shake back and forth. Finding trees broke over that were like 8 or 9 inches in diameter. So you're finding those things broke over around the 8 or 10 foot mark, and there was no wind or anything. It would just happen overnight. All of this kind of progressed with odd things happening from time to time until I found a track. When I found the footprint track, that's when it all hit me, and I was blown away. That changed my life. From that day forward, I began to go onto the internet and look at anything and read every book I could find to find out if this is what I had on our property. And as it turned out, all the criteria that I was reading about matched exactly what was going on my property. So that's kind of how it started. And then of course I reached out to a group that I'd found on the internet called the BFRO, and the BFRO, Bigfoot Researchers Organization Group, sent out a lady, and we met for coffee in a town close by and explained some things to me, and I had a lot of questions, but she came out with her night vision. She actually was employed by the United States Army stationed at Fort Benning in Georgia here. She was enlisted for a while, and then she after she got out, she continued as a civilian worker there in the office. But she came out brought night vision goggles, and we did a couple walks around the property at night, and we heard some things. She showed me some really cool structures, TP type structures in the woods, and some more things that really started to open my eyes what was going on. And from that moment on, I've been researching, talking to as many people as I can possibly talk to, and that's kind of where it all started.
Oh, okay. So you all went and you did this like investigation with the night vision and everything. She was from the BFRO?
Yes.
So did you all get any video, or did you record anything? Did you?
No.
What did you all see?
We didn't see anything with the night vision at all. We didn't record anything, but she brought it all out anyway.
Okay.
What we did find was she pointed out to me a very cool structure. I would call it. It was shaped like a teepee, and I'd walk by this thing half a dozen times in the past, and I would notice that there would be like sticks added to it, and I didn't have any idea what it was. It was kind of strange looking, but I had no idea what it was until she showed me the trail that ran parallel to it. And then when I put some focus on going back down there and keeping an eye on, I put a game camera up not too far from the structure, and that's actually where we found our footprint. And I did get an odd photo the very night that I got the footprint, but whatever was close to the camera was so close that it whited it out.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't get a clear shot, but the camera was located about 5.5 foot up, aiming down toward a creek. It had to have been extremely close because the tree was right on the creek bank. If it was walking in that creek and it walked in front of that camera, it had to have been extremely high to block out that camera.
How big is this structure that you all discovered?
It was about 7 foot high. Around the base was probably 8 foot.
Okay.
Like I said, the sticks were stacked up like a teepee structure. And what I also noticed when I found it was when we found the track, the next day I went back down there to the track again and took some more photos. But there was tons of deer hair all around the bottom of that structure. I mean, it was like pulled out and just laid on the ground. Anybody that's been hunting a lot, if you run across a predator kill, you'll find hair and this, that, and the other. But there was no deer. It was just looked like where one had gotten caught or damaged. And I kind of was thinking, well, maybe they caught that deer there, which ends up being part of what happened, because there was a situation that came up about a year after that where I heard a deer get caught, killed. And it was killed in that area, and I was a couple of hills over, and I got to see, I found the deer with a broken neck, and I saw flashes of black going through the woods. When I topped the hill, the deer was still kind of moving around a bit, just, barely, and I went over and looked at it, and it was, it was dead by the time I got there, but there was an awful crashing going through the trees from this deer, and whatever it was running away. Now, my first impression, it was a poacher there with a bow and arrow or something, because there was no sound except for the deer screaming. But when I got to the deer and I turned it over and looked, there was no wounds whatsoever. The deer just had a snapped neck. I got a photo of that too. It's pretty. But then I got to thinking about what that was going through the woods running. And again, I began keeping a journal when I found the track. So I just started adding all these strange things to my journal. I called my son over. We took a look at the deer, took some photos. I wrote it all down. I didn't touch the deer. We left it there. I went back the next day. The deer was completely gone. There was nothing there. There was not drag marks in the leaves.
It was picked up and taken away.
Yes. Whatever got this deer picked it up, throwed it away. That's right.
So you reckon you stumbled across a Bigfoot hunting or making a kill?
Yes.
And scared him off. And you didn't have time to take it.
That because and where this occurred was just a little bit away from the teepee structure. But with me being hunting on my if it was a pinch point or a funnel area where there was a large hill on one side, a large hill on the other, this was a trail that ran along the level part of the property, down along a creek bottom, and it was the perfect area for deer to funnel in and out, going into their feeding and bedding areas. My thought was they're using this teepee structure somehow as a blind, run the deer up, beside the blind, and then one would do that, and one would grab the deer or whatever on the other side. That was what I was thinking. But again, I'm just trying to vision of what's going on.
You'd have to be a pretty powerful creature to pick up a deer and snap its back. I don't know of any human that could really do that. No, it was a yearling spike. It wasn't a huge deer, but there's no way I could. And I definitely couldn't have snapped its neck like that. Even a yearling, they're pretty fast. And they're
Right.
pretty strong. They can hurt you. Even then.
That's right.
So,
So,
and
yeah.
this is on your property, right, Keith? And this is
Yes, sir.
on. And how big is your property?
Well, the property is only 450 acres, but
Okay.
it's surrounded.
Good size.
It's surrounded by thousands of acres all the way around. The thing about our property is you can't get in there. We have a gate. It's gated, first of all. You have to have a key to get in the gate.
Okay.
There's no way to get in it from any other access except for a road that drives through the woods about a mile and a half. And so we're very aware of anyone that's going in and out has to have a key. And we were down there for probably, I'm thinking we were there for like 2 days. And we were there to hunt for like 4 days. And this was halfway through our hunt when all this happened. And we know there was nobody on our property. You know, we've had that land for 30 some odd years. We have never had anyone get onto our property like that. You know, never had an issue. So,
all these are just recent occurrences that they haven't happened before? Nothing like that?
This all started around 2009, 2010.
Okay.
There was one time my dad had shot a deer. We were tracking it at night with lantern, and my cousin and I was walking through the woods, and we would walk, and we would hear something walking beside us, and I would look at him, and he's like, "What is that over there?" And I'm like, "I don't know unless it's a coyote," but it sounded like it was on 2 legs. You know, you can tell a bipedal foot sounds false. So as we walked, it would walk. We would stop, it would stop, and this happened until we found the deer. We got the deer, we pulled it out, and went back to camp. But those are some of the things that would happen. And then we started, some of our other hunters, the guys that hunted with us, mostly family, came back to camp this one day, and they were all excited and said, "There's a gorilla or a monkey on this property." And I'm like, yeah. He says, "Well, we heard these sounds. It sounded just like an ape or just like a gorilla in the zoo." Really? And he's like, "Yeah." And we had several people hear that. My dad heard it. My little niece, who was only 8 years old, she was out there. So there were several people reporting this too. And all of this kind of like escalated into things happening around our camp at night. Like I said, my mom and dad were down there sleeping in a truck camper, and they were, fast asleep. And all of a sudden the truck starts shaking violently. My mom wakes up and she's trying to wake my dad up. They have a little dog they had in there, and it started barking and raising all kind of cane. So she was scared, wanted my dad to go out and look around, and he was so asleep he wouldn't get up. And by the time he woke up, whatever it was gone. He opened the back of the tailgate, but I think he was a little afraid to look out.
Yeah.
My mom gave. But that happened all the way up until my son was actually one night down with my parents. Again, he was camping with them. I was on a trip to Texas, and he was out, and they had heard a lot of coyotes around camp, and he had taken his gun because we try to keep the coyotes, from coming into our camp. This little dog, and we didn't want the little dog to get attacked or whatever. So he took a gun and walked around the corner from the campfire, standing there, and something runs at him through the trees, and it's so big that it's pushing over 8, 9, 10 foot tall pine trees like grass, and it's running toward him and breaking sticks and making a lot of noise. And it scares him so bad, he just turns and runs. He don't pull his gun up or anything. He got in the camper, locked the door, and he said he was so afraid. The terror that he felt inside was so great that he couldn't even speak for a couple of minutes. Mom calmed him. And he's 15 years old at the time, so whatever it was, it scared him so bad that it took him 5 or 10 minutes to settle down to where he could even talk. Yeah, so, that happened. And then, and I'm pretty big into the research part by now, and and after track, I realized that we have these things on our property. I began to get a little afraid of him being down there in the woods hunting, and for us and my mom and dad, I'm like, because I don't know what they're going to do. I'm just learning about them. So at the end of that particular deer season, we ended up, after I had the land for so long, we ended up finding another tract closer to home. I was a little afraid to be down there again. So we found a tract of land that was, it was another 500 acres, but it was a hunting club. We joined it. It was about half the drive. And when we got down there, I looked around to make sure there was no signs of these are teepees. I looked for tracks because I didn't want to be where they were. I was really afraid for myself, but more so for my son. Once we found this particular tract of land, everything was good for about a year.
So there weren't any footprints around the camp or anything the next morning? They didn't.
We never found a footprint around camp. Never. No, we wouldn't. When we were around the campfire, we would have them walking, and you could hear them walking around outside the firelight, just far enough out to where you couldn't hear. And I've learned since then they're extremely careful about leaving footprints. They're very familiar with what they're doing. They try not to. As a matter of fact, when my son and I were trying to find out what was going on, and we were trying to find tracks or whatever, we walked a stream that ran through the middle of the property and found that we think they were using that creek and that stream and trying to stay on the rocks as much as possible to prevent leaving a footprint. So. And I found a couple more tracks while we were there. There was one. The creek was about 12 foot wide from bank to bank on this one section. There was one in the bottom, halfway through the creek. It's like stepped off the bank, stepped in the creek, and stepped up on the other bank, which was a 12-foot span, and never left another track. Wow. So again, I got photos of those, and it all goes into my journal. But this was only the beginning. Things got much.
This was around 2000, and that's when you found this structure. So you think maybe a Bigfoot came and decided that's going to be part of my territory and erected the structure, and now you're seeing activity.
Well, actually, I think they had been there all along because we began talking about it. My dad, myself, about all the strange things we had heard along through the years and screams that we'd hear. We heard these screams and. I'll tell you that the one sounded like a cow when it started, and then it got so loud it was like extremely loud. It would shake your insides when.
Wow!
But it'd start out low and it would rise and pitch until it ended up into a scream that sounded very very scary.
Yeah. So it wasn't a human scream. It was more.
Whatever made this scream had a large set of lungs. It was extremely loud, and even when they were at a far off distance, I mean, we had some scream in close, but you could hear them, and it would just echo through the night. They were really loud.
So you think it was just one animal, or was several of them screaming? You think
there were several? There's been several times we were sitting around camp, and they would be screaming on one end of the property and then screaming somewhere else, and then we heard several back and forth.
Maybe they were communicating with each other.
That's what I think now. Yes, yes, sir.
Them hitting the side of trees, knocking, and anything like that.
Yes, I hear that quite a bit. After we had heard the screams, the one night we had gotten down to our hunting property late, and my son had this was turkey season. We were going to go turkey hunting, and he had installed this sight on his gun. He wanted to shoot it, so we turned the headlights on the truck and on target, put the target up, and he shot it. And as soon as the echo of the gun stopped, we started hearing the screams, and the wood tapping started like you're talking about. We heard it several times back and forth, just big, large whacks, 2 or 3 of them, and then we'd hear it somewhere else too. And I have heard those all the way up until this year down on that particular property. They do that quite a bit now down there.
Or they could be warning the other ones that you're around, maybe, or that you're armed, or
they know that I'm armed. We've progressed so far through this thing into actual sightings, and that's where things have gotten really good. I don't know if you want me to just tell my story straight out, or you want to have questions up to this point.
No, go right ahead. If you could share it with us, we'd appreciate that.
Go for it, Keith. This is fascinating. I am in my element.
Okay. As things turned out, we moved to another tract of property, like about half of the distance of driving. It was on a property very close to the Chattahoochee River here in Georgia, which now I know is long known for Bigfoot sightings up and down that river. So after we moved into this camp, and like I told you, I looked for any kind of sign because I didn't want to be on property because I was afraid of. Didn't see any signs on the property. My wife and I were down in camping one night. Had a really fun day camping, and I don't even think we were hunting that weekend. I think we just went down to camp. We were laying in the camper, and I heard audible talking outside the camper. Couldn't make out what the person, or as it turns out now, I think was a Bigfoot, was making, but it was gibberish. It was loud, it was deep, and they were doing it loud enough to where I could hear them. And I had been doing research a little bit along and had run across Ron Moorhead's Sierra Sounds. And in some of that, there's some actual language that's been discovered by Scott Nelson, another friend of mine here. And they were making those sounds. It was like they were gibberish talking, but they were making a sound that to me sounded like talking outside the camper. And as soon as I heard it, and my mind went straight away to listening to Ron Moorhead's tape of the Sierra Sounds, and I told my wife, I think there's Bigfoots out there. She said, really? I said, yeah, I can. You hear that? She said, yeah, I can hear it. It's just right outside. I tried looking out the window. I didn't see anything, but we could hear the back and forth, between a couple of them. So, and that set in motion things that really escalated to my wife's visual. And that's where I'll take you now. After we heard that, I started finding some of those signs again. Bent over trees, found broke trees. I didn't find any footprints, but I was just finding some of the same things that I'd seen on the other property. So at this point in time, I'm on Facebook a lot, and I have met a couple of friends, and I don't know if you guys are familiar with Melba Ketchum and her DNA study.
Yes.
Yeah. So I had become friends with her on Facebook, and this was in the midst of her study. And we were talking one night, and she, all the things that you have going on, I really think you have some great activity. I want you to seek out this lady. She's the real deal. You need to talk to her about what you need to do next and how, because I'm wanting to find out at this point in time as much as I can about them. But I also want to know, if I can't find a property that they're not on, what do I do to not be afraid? Are they going to hurt me? So she gave me the name of a lady called Arla Williams. Her name's Arla Williams. And I also was introduced to Tom Cantrell, a lady, Autumn Williams. I don't know if you're familiar with her. She had a TV program here. So I began talking to them, and they were really helping me out with a lot of my questions and helping me understand some things. Autumn Williams called me one day, and we chatted for over an hour about everything that was going on, and she gave me some good tips. So I started trying to follow the leads of these people. Arla had told me they're not there to hurt you. They're another type of people. She said, what you need to do, start communicating with them, start telling them, just walk out in the woods and say who you are, and you're not there to hurt anybody. You just want to be friends. And she said, just start it out that way. And she said, stay at it and see where that goes. And so we started doing that. My wife and I would go out, and it felt a little strange at first to go out and start talking in the woods, not seeing anything. But we did what she said. And what started happening was we started having things like gifting. I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but
yes.
A little table outside our camper, and there was one afternoon I was coming in, and my wife had been in the camper taking a nap, and there was a rock with a feather on top. There was a feather underneath the rock. Somebody had taken that feather, and you're not going to find a feather under a rock laying somewhere like that. And I'm thinking, is this, because she had mentioned that to me, that they would do things like this. And I'm thinking, now that's pretty wild. And so we took photos. I wrote all that down. And this became more and more. We started seeing these. We would find leaves arranged in a certain way under a stick on the table or something like that. And, just different things. So we started putting out little things too to give back. And then, I'm doing everything that I'm being told by Arla. And so there was this one evening we had taken our grandson down there, and we're sitting around the fire talking, and you could hear sticks breaking out close to our camp. So I was pretty aware there was something around, even seeing an occasional limb move. So we tried to be friendly. I talked just like they were standing there. So after all that, we didn't hear anything for an hour, so we went to bed. Well, the very next day, I rode out on my ATV over to a section of our property, and right around the corner from our camp, there was a big pine tree that was about 50, 60 feet high that had been bent all the way over. I guess they climbed the tree and pulled it over somehow. There was a dead tree that was dragged about 20 feet from where it originally was. It was placed on the top of the tree, so it was perfectly bent over.
We will be right back after these important messages.
Hi there, my name is Claire Waters, and I would like to invite you on an incredible journey. I have written a book based on my personal experiences called Raising Faith, a true story of raising a child's psychic medium. It's my family's extraordinary experiences with our young daughter's ability to communicate with spirits and the inspirational lessons learned on our journey. Raising Faith is currently available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and wherever books are sold. Join me on this beautiful and incredible adventure. For more information on Raising Faith, visit my website, raisingfaith.co.uk, or my Facebook page, Raising Faith Book. See you there.
Sixth Books will take you to other worlds, haunt you, open your mind, and push you far beyond the veil of the unknown. Sixth Books is a leading publisher of books on the body, mind, and spirit, the paranormal, consciousness, ancient wisdom, and the afterlife. Explore today, learn today, open your mind today, read today. Visit sixth-books.com today. The world as you know it is about to change.
Do you wish for more paranormal and spiritual content? The Paranormal Chronicles magazine is a free digital magazine crammed with the very best in paranormal and spiritual articles and features. No sign up, no subscription, just free reading and knowledge for you. Read today at www.theparanormalchronicles.com/magazine.
The international chart-topping, haunted horror of Haverfordwest has been described as terrifyingly real, a must-read, shocking and chilling brilliance, genuinely worrying, utterly frightening. Don't read before bed. Described as one of the spookiest writers out there, best-selling author G.L. Davies presents Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest, the true paranormal account that is shocking the world. Dare you enter? Dare you read? Haunted Horror of Haverfordwest is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Kindle, and wherever books are sold. Pray you never have to live there.
With this tree laying on it, and I'm like, that just fascinated me. That was another moment that I'll never forget.
These are heavy trees, right? They're not just.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
The tree that he dragged over was. There's no way I could have drug it. It was about a 10 or 12 foot section. I don't know. I couldn't reach around it. It was that big, and it laid.
So you would need equipment in there to drag it, to pick it up, and
yes, exactly.
At least something, a cherry picker or something.
That's right. So we thought that pretty strange. Well, the very next day after I found that tree, I was going down to another section of our property. This was during turkey season, and I was gonna do some turkey hunting that day. And I had set up my decoys, and I was sitting on the edge of a field, and I started hearing this weird bird whistling, just very agitated, loud, and it was obnoxious. It was one of those things. It was driving me crazy to hear. It was getting loud, and it was bugging me. It went on for like 30 minutes, and I finally got tired of hearing it. I'm thinking it's a bird, so I get my decoys. I walk toward the sound, and the sound stops. So I look around. I don't see anything. I dropped my decoys. I had my chair. I just set my chair up and sat back down and just started thinking about, what was making that weird noise, and how come I didn't see I didn't see anything run or fly off. Well, the sound started again, and this time it was on the other side of me toward a little hill alongside a roadbed. So again, I stand up, I walk over to where I'm hearing these noises, and I walk over the hill, and there in the roadway, or right on the side of the roadway, is this huge stack of rocks. One of the rocks, the one on the bottom, it had to be well over 100, 200 pounds. It was huge. I couldn't pick it up. And then there was other rocks stacked on top of it and balanced to the point I'm like, wow. Now that don't happen naturally. And that had just happened. That I'd been up and down that road the day before. It wasn't there. And I saw that.
Did you get a photo of it?
Oh, I did. I do have that photo.
Okay.
And I'll send you guys some of this stuff through some emails.
Oh, great. Appreciate that. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Absolutely.
So I got a photo of that. I took my wife, and we took a grandson Lane down there and took some pictures of it. And that became our new gifting spot. We would drive down and watermelon and stuff like that there. And almost every time that we would take something over there, it would be gone when we go back. And then there was this one particular day that we decided to do apples instead. And this particular day, this was next weekend, I think it was, our other grandson Hunter was with us, and we took a bag of apples. There were 7 apples in the bag, and we drove over to where the big pine that's pinned to the ground. We drove over there. It's not far from camp, and there was a tree that they had pushed over since that was just broken off, was leaning kind of at a slant, but it was fairly level, but it was slanted a little bit. And I told Hunter, I said, why don't you put those apples, just set them there on that tree, and let's see what happens. So he takes the apples out. He puts the first, second, third one up, the fourth one. Well, the 5th apple, he was having a hard time keeping it on the tree, and it kept rolling off. So finally, he decides that's not going to stay there. And I said, I tell you what, see that stump? There's a stump over there. Just take those other apples and put them on the stump. So he did. So there was, he had gotten 5 on the tree. So the other 2 apples he put on the stump. So he puts them on the stump, and this was during the evening, about an hour before dark. We go back to camp, we grill out, we do, do our camping stuff. So we go to bed. The next morning, they're still asleep. I decided I want to ride over and look at these apples are asleep. So I did, and I got over there, and I noticed there was only 1 apple on the stump. So I'm thinking, okay, deer or raccoon or something like that took that apple. Then I looked over at the tree, and there were 6 apples on the tree. There was only 5.
Wow.
So they had taken the other apple and put it on the tree.
He managed to put it on the tree.
Yeah, and immediately when that happened, I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if they were watching him try to put that apple up there, and it kept falling off, so they were showing him.
That was what I thought too.
Yeah. So it was cool things like that would start happening. And as I'm talking to Arla, and we're getting more involved in trying to talk to them and be friendly and gifting them, my whole perception of them changed from being afraid to being delighted when something would happen. It would be so fun. So I'm starting to get pretty excited about the chances of me actually seeing one. Although it hadn't happened yet, I did catch a couple glimpses on our property of something moving through the woods, but I'd never seen exactly what it was. We'll go past this particular weekend. We'll fast forward about another 3 weeks. Toward the end of the season, we're down at our property, and we had taken Lane, one of our other grandkids, back down there with us. And he camps, and we go out, we do our gifting and that. And we're the next morning after we did our gifting, his mom don't live too far away, so she's going to come by and pick him up at camp and take him home. So she drives into camp, and she gets out, and we talk. And Lane gets in the car and buckles up. He's getting ready to go home with his mom, and my wife talking to her daughter, Amanda, and she's talking, and I'm just standing beside the car listening to the conversation with my back to the woods and kind of propped up on the car, and my wife's facing the woods. And as she's talking to her daughter, she stops in mid-sentence, and I notice her looking through the woods, but she doesn't say anything. Amanda don't say anything, and she looked back at Amanda and said, well, I think I'm going to go in. I don't feel too good. I'm going to take something for a headache. And I could tell that her whole mood had changed. And I'm like, I wonder what's going on with her. And I didn't say anything. Amanda hugged her goodbye, and she drove off. And as soon as Amanda drove off, she runs over, grabs me by the arm. She said, I just saw one. I said, saw what? She said, I just saw a Bigfoot. She said, I just seen one. He poked his head around a tree and looked at me. And I'm like, really? So she takes me over, and it's only right across from where we were standing. I'd say 20, 25 feet. There's a big tree there. And I look around, there's nothing there. But she said that she had looked over and saw something move, and the next thing she knew, this thing was looking at her, and it smiled. She said, I could see it so clearly. She said, the eyes, everything. So she's describing it to me, and she's all excited, and I'm all excited. And enough around the bottom of that tree, you could tell something that had been standing there behind the tree. So I'm like, we both go in the camper, we sit down, and we talk about this for the rest of the day. It was one of those things that completely just changed my whole perspective. When I seen her reaction to him, and she wasn't afraid, and her saying that she didn't feel afraid because it smiled at her, I'm thinking, this is pretty cool. This is not these big hairy monsters. These are not the beasts that people tell us about, on the movies and on TV. These things are can be very friendly. So yeah, that settled me point that this is going to be something that I'm going to be trying to pursue the rest of my life. I want to find out more about them. I want to know more about them. So that particular day, my wife and I both got extremely interested in doing research anytime we could. We started going to, we went to a conference back in 2010, went to a conference, and then we went to Alex Midnight Walker here in Georgia had a conference in 2012. We went there and got to hear great speakers like Ron Moorhead, Scott Nelson, got to meet a bunch of really cool people, and really started getting interested and involved in the Bigfoot community. so to speak. And since I became a part of that community and started meeting people in that, I've learned that there's two sides of the community. There's some really mean people out there, and there's some really, really cool, good people that have a lot of really nice things to share. So my next few years after that, I've been dedicated to meeting as many of these people as I can. I started actually going out and investigating. I'd have people call me. I'd run a couple of, there's a local internet group here in the county that I live in that's just like a community type page. I put on there one day, has anybody ever seen a Bigfoot in this area or whatever? Of course, I got a lot of crazy emails, about people laughing and stuff, but I also got some really good ones. So I went out and started doing some investigations and uncovered some cool things. So that's kind of how everything started. Now, once my wife had the sighting and we really started getting into it, Arla Williams and I decided that she wants to come to Georgia. She lives in Oklahoma, quite a distance from here. So she decides she wants to come to Georgia, and we're going to try to do a camp out, which is, I'm all for it. I want her to show me how she communicates. Now, Arla, she grew up when she was 6 years old. She's seen her first Bigfoot. She's got some Native American blood in her. Her grandmother was Native American, and she taught her after she had seen one when she was 6 years old to go and get your own answers, find out what they are, who they are, yourself. She's had interaction for many years, and so she had a lot of super good advice, and I wanted to know how she could have, interactions the way she does, and she sees them quite often. So when she came to Georgia, it was a big thrill. We got to meet her when she did the conference here, and so the next year we decided to try to do this camp out thing. So we put together a group on Facebook. We invited a few researcher friends. We found an area, my wife and I did, driving around that had some history, found an area to have the camp out, and we started having the camp out there. And it's along the edge of the Chattahoochee River. And an old Indian reservation was there for years ago. And once we started doing the camp outs, that has been extraordinary, and that's led up to a lot of the things in my book. So before I go any further, do you guys have any questions?
So all this is covered in your book, and just your camp out and everything. And did you get the opportunity to record any of these sounds, Keith?
I never got into doing the recording thing because I wasn't trying to prove it to anyone except for myself. But I did own a digital recorder. I tried to set the recorder out, but I would never have it on when they were making the noises. And I never could really figure out how to do that. However, when we started having the campouts, I've had some of the guys there that are a lot better at audio than I am record some sounds, and we do have some recordings from our campouts. Yes.
Oh, okay. And could you give us an example of what, you all did the gifting, you all would give them fruit, apples, and what would they leave? What would they do in return?
Almost every time they would either leave a feather of some sort, or they would leave a really pretty leaf of something like that. It was almost everything that was organic. They never brought us anything. I guess they don't have a big shopping area there. So,
No.
whatever.
Well, no, you wouldn't expect that. No.
We've had some quartz like rocks too.
Yeah.
Evidently, the quartz thing is something big with them, and I don't know what it is, but that's happened a few times with quartz.
When this Bigfoot peeked around the corner and you smiled at your wife, could she describe what it looked like? Was it more human or more ape-like?
No, she said that the sense that she got was it was a very hairy man. She said, I didn't see. She described it. She said it did have a point on top of its head that it was noticed. She said the brow ridge was very heavy. That it was kind of like what you would think a caveman would look like, with a little more hair and a pointy head. Described. The hair was a dark color, blackish or dark brown or blackish color. There was a little bit of hair along the edges of his face. Cheekbones were bare. They didn't have any hair on the cheekbones. And it had like a very heavy bearded mustache that hang down probably, 8 or 10 inches. She said it was really hairy that way, yeah.
More on the human side then.
Yes, and that was the sense that she had with the expression that he had on his face.
Right.
And it really made her feel good and not afraid. She wasn't afraid of it at all. The dull things that's happened. We get a lot better.
Dave introduced me to your book, Forest Friends of the Night, and I think it's the best book I think I've ever read on the Bigfoot subject. It is absolutely superb. And it's got so much more information that we won't be releasing in this recording. So where can people get Forest Friends of the Night from?
That is available on almost any of the internet book sites, Amazon.com. And you can also read the reviews there. There's the one that I would suggest, and you can also get it at BarnesandNoble.com. You can also go into Barnes & Noble in the bookstore and order it. They'll ship it to the store, and you can pick it up there. But those are the easiest places to find. Now, I have sold quite a few in the UK, and I know there's several other options there in the UK as well. Well, like I said, I try to document as much as I can, because for me, and the job that I had for the last 24 years is root cause analysis, documentation, and that's how I'm trained. It's a scientific process that I go through trying to prove or disprove anything.
Yes.
So I've tried to be as accurate as I could in the details that I log down. And when something happens, if you write it down right away, you tend to not lose some of the things that that happen. But yeah, that's I appreciate that. It was fun writing the book. It didn't take that long to do it because I've had everything written down. Now, a lot of the book I've taken pretty much just right out of my journal. Even though I did post some of the journal there almost verbatim, I took most everything out of that journal, copy and paste a lot. So there's a few grammar issues there, but I'm not a professional writer. I was just trying to be accurate. But yeah, what's happened up to this point has been pretty fascinating. But my life and a lot of other people's lives are going to start. I've seen some life-altering change of some people that's been with us. When Arla came to Georgia and we started our campouts, my wife and I had found the place that I just told you about. And so we launched this group site on Facebook, and we pulled in our closest friends. Arla came down. I had people flying in from Colorado, some from the Bigfoot researchers groups out that way, and the Colorado Rocky Mountains, Washington State. And if you see the map of the United States, it's completely far corner of the United States from Georgia. So I had people flying in from there, Texas, Oklahoma. We had a pretty big contingent of some of the best researchers that you'll ever know. They came in, and we began our campouts back in 2012. The campouts started and were a huge success. Number one, and I'll have to tell you about how we discovered this place, because this is a fascinating story.
Oh, please do.
My wife and I drove out to the area that we were talking or thinking about, and I had talked to Arla about, to do a little more, walking around, see if we could get some photos of tracks or anything like that, see how much sign that we could see. We arrived there about 4 o'clock in the evening on a Saturday, and we had about 3 hours until it started to get dark. As soon as we pull up, I open the door of the car, and I smell a stench. The stench is so bad that it smells like something rotting or rotted. So I'm like, okay, I'd heard that these things could smell like that, but just in case, we'd pulled into a campsite. I went to every trash can around the campsite within an area of about, a quarter of a mile and checked them. There was nothing in any of the cans that was creating that smell. And there was a little steady breeze blowing from the woods to us. So to me, that smell, and being a hunter, the smell was coming from that wood line. So I walked over there. I didn't see anything dead laying around. So after about an hour's worth of looking around, we decided that whatever it is, it's not anything we're going to be able to find, because, we looked over pretty good the area. So I'm thinking it could be, attributed to the Bigfoot. I'd never smelled them before, so this was new for me. After that, there's several trails on that property, and we picked a trail that ran along. There was one trail that ran along the bottom of a creek, and there was an upper trail that was along the ridge line above the creek. So we decided we'd walk the ridge line trail, the one on the top, because I think we could see better, and we could see, the area a lot better. So we start walking that trail. The wind's blowing from the creek is on my right. The breeze is blowing from the creek towards us, kind of a crosswind. And as we're walking down the trail, the smell comes back, and we're smelling it again. And I'm like, okay, if that is the Bigfoot people that we're smelling, they're over on that trail that runs along the creek, because that's where the wind's blowing from. We walked that ridge line, and one of the things we found immediately was a very huge X made out of 2 dead trees. I don't know, they were probably 20 feet high. and they formed a perfect X there on the trail. And I'm pointing that out to my wife, and we found trees that had been bent all the way over, just like I described before. There was one that was about 10 feet high that was bent all the way over and shoved down into the ground. And it was just a perfect bowed tree. And so we're taking photos of those, and we're walking down the trail, and when it stays with us, when we hear this sound of something running up the hill in front of us, and it's coming pretty close to, it's going to pop out right there in front of us. I don't know what's about to pop out of the trail. And when we look up, and it's a deer. The deer is running from that creek bottom where it was to the right of us as we was walking down. And it blows across the trail just wide open. It was running really, really fast, and you could tell it was spooked. Something had scared it. And I told my wife, that's pretty unusual for a deer to run like that, because normally a deer, they'll just try to sneak away. If, you're coming, they see you coming, they'll just sneak away. You won't even know they're around. So that was pretty odd behavior, I thought. Finished up that walk along that trail, and we still had about an hour before dark, and I told my wife, I want to go back down to that bottom trail. If the Bigfoots were along that bottom trail, along the sandy part of that trail, we might be able to find some tracks or whatever. We turned around, we walked back down where we came in, because you couldn't go down that hill. It was really steep. We entered the bottom trail next to the creek. We walked that trail about 200, maybe 250 yards, and we found some of the best tracks I've ever seen, impressions in the sand. There were, and I've got photos I can send you these two. There was there was one track that was, I don't know, probably 12, 14 inches. Wasn't super huge, but it was pretty big. It was barefoot. And you got to remember, this is in the closer to the winter time, and I don't think anybody would be walking through the woods barefoot. This is a horse trail. So we found it was extremely fresh. It hadn't been made long. And then there was a little bitty track. It was only about 4 inches long. And my wife took pictures of that one. She was like, oh, look, it's a little bitty one. So she gets off, looking at that thing. And I decided to try to do the stride from track to track. And so I stood beside the one track, the right foot, and I had to jump to the left foot, and I couldn't even get the distance. I couldn't make it. It was still another couple feet in front of me. I couldn't clear that distance in a running, jumping stride. It was a big stride. So we took those photos, and we're looking at them, and we're pretty excited about how fresh these tracks are. We go back to where we parked, and I wanted to sit out, just let it get dark and see what happened. Got our lounge chairs out, we sat down, and almost immediately we hear walking in the woods. Coming from that trail, whatever it was, cross the road, because you could hear it get close to the road. When they got over into the strip of woods in front of us, we were sitting there, and all of a sudden this stick comes flying out of the woods, and it lands at my feet. And I'm looking at the stick, and I'm like, they're throwing sticks at me. The whole time we sat there, they're tossing pebbles and sticks that are landing all around me, and they're not throwing any at her. I mean, she's sitting like 10 feet away, and she's laughing because they're throwing everything at me. And I found that, so I laughed about it, because I know they're messing with me now. So that actually gave me a really good feeling, because I think if they would have wanted to hurt me or hit me with a rock, they would have.
Oh, absolutely.
So we had that going on. So as it got a little darker and they stopped throwing the sticks, we were going to go ahead and call it a night and drive back home. We were only about an hour away. So we drive home, and we're super excited and stoked about what we've seen and everything that happened. So I immediately get on the phone. I call Arla, and I tell her, I say, hey, this is the place. We're going to have fun here. And I explained to her all the things that went on. So that started our camp outs. Moving on toward, this was in the early spring, moving on toward October. We decided to have the camp out starting in October. So we had the date set. Everybody started arriving to camp out, picking up some folks from the airports, bringing them in and setting up camp and all that. Get everything set up one afternoon, and our first annual camp out begins. And we've been doing it every year since. So we actually just put on another one. We're doing 2 a year now. There's so many people wants to come. And we try to bring the people that we know are in it for the right reasons. And I'm not one that wants to kill a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, because my whole thing now is I know there are people, and the more research I've done, the more that I've been shown that. by them. So I just want to have the experiences, and I want to share my experiences with anybody that I think is in it for the right reason. Again, that's one of the reasons I wrote the book, to kind of give that perspective, my perspective on what I've seen, and try to get rid of that stereotype that they're all monsters, because I don't believe that. Now, do I think there could be some that would hurt you? Absolutely, I do. But it's the same thing as if you break into someone's home with a gun, expect that if they've got a gun or they're able to get some, they're going to shoot back. That's the same thing I feel about them. We're encroaching onto their woods, their homes, and if you go in looking to hurt them, sure, that could be pretty dangerous.
Well, sure, of course. And I'm sure just like if they're closer to human, they probably all have different personalities, different likes, dislikes, and just like anybody else.
Yes, sir. And that's exactly what I found out. Now, going back to the camp out starts in October. Everybody, the very first night, we're camping in. And I'm not camping out. I actually live pretty close, so I'm just driving there every day. So everybody goes to bed. Well, the next day I go there in the morning, and everybody has stories about, wow, they came into our camp last night. So I get to hear these stories about the Bigfoot people coming in and shaking the tents or poking the tent and touching people on their cots. This one gentleman, Tom Cantrell, was there. He had one look in his window at him while he was laying on his cot. So, yeah, it was pretty fascinating. They came in that close, but they were very playful that first night. And everybody had experiences. And the whole group was just gibbering with excitement when I got there that morning, talking about all the cool things that they had happen. And we had some prints there in camp that we were able to get. One gentleman that does audio set out. He was recorded the very next night, and we got a really good audio that night. So when we start these things, we're going to do a couple of night walks, take people, we'll go out at night. A lot of people are exploring during the day, and, people coming back with fascinating photos of all kinds of, bent over trees and little structures they had found and that. So, and it's really cool when you have that many investigators in an area, because you can really understand what's going on a lot quicker. We're all pretty much the same mind as far as what we're doing. So this was a fascinating couple of days. It led up to one of our night walks. During the night walk this was a Friday night, I took some people out to that same area there where we found the tracks on the trails, and we walked that bottom trail at night. Just turn our flashlights on, and we move a little bit, turn the lights off, and we'd just stand there and would ask if there were any around, and would make a noise or whatever. Well, the first night walk we did, and I had bought a parabolic microphones with the earphones. So I bought one of those things, and those things are great, by the way, if you want to go out and hear night sounds. Immediately when we walk into the area there where we're going into, there's a little bridge that you have to cross the creek that they built a footbridge there. So we crossed the footbridge, and immediately I put the parabolic on. I had everybody stop, and you could hear two of these big Bigfoot moving on opposite hills. There's one to our right, one to our left, and they're moving down the hill. You can hear them walking. You hear the footsteps very clearly on the parabolic, and they would move very, very close to our group within, I'd say, 20 feet into the brush. And as long as we stood there, they would stand there. They wouldn't make any sound other than we would hear them. We would start walking. They would start walking. It was almost like they were sentries, and they were escorting us into this area.
Oh, wow. So
I'll let different people try the parabolic and hear them for themselves. That was pretty cool when we were walking in. And then once we got in there a little ways, we'd seen these really bright lights kind of up on a hill, and I'm looking at the lights, and what is that? Looking, and all of a sudden you see them blink, and it's like two eyes, and they're not that far away.
Oh, wow.
But that's when I first started seeing what's called eye shine. The group got to see it. We heard it walking. We could see the things, and ever so often we'd hear a little stick whack a tree or two, just a couple of taps, not very loud.
Yeah.
Knew that they were going in with us, and that was really cool. And we had a lot of people got to participate in that. That was a very fun first one.
Yeah, and you're planning some more of these in the future? Is these more of these campaigns that are on? And...
We just finished one for doing another one in October. I'll have a lot more people. I think Bob Gimlin, if you know Bob Gimlin, I think he may come to this next one. We're really good friends with him.
Sounds fascinating.
Yeah, I just finished a conference. I've been doing conferences up in Washington State a few weeks back, and he and I talked about, him coming out here. So we're going to try to do that. Now, these campouts, that was the first one. We had a lot of cool things happen. But the next year, I had a buddy of mine, Jason, a couple other guys, and their sons wanted to go out during the spring for a night walk. And I, like, sure, we'll do that. So my wife and I showed up one Saturday. We grilled out steaks, had a great time waiting for it to get dark. And we decided we're going to go on a night walk, just us. The boys, the younger ones didn't want to go. So my wife stayed in the camp with those boys. And the men decided we're going to go do this walk. So we jump in my truck, we pile in, all 5 of us. We drive down to the camp where I usually park my car going in, or my truck. And there's some people camping down there. So, I walk over, introduce myself, wanted to make sure they knew I was just going to park here. We're just going to walk back in the woods and that. Now, it's hard to explain to people what you're doing. You don't want to scare them, So I'm just telling them we're going to go back, and, we like to hear night sounds, and we record things, like owls or whatever we hear, we like to do that. So I don't know what they were thinking at that time, but the lady that I was talking to, she says, well, when you're back there, I want you to look. I think there's a kid lost. She said, I tried to call the ranger, and I've left a message. We keep hearing a baby crying back there. She said, yeah, we've heard it several times. Well, you remember the small footprints I told you we found. So I'm thinking immediately it's not a baby human. It's that you're hearing. Yeah. But I didn't tell her anything. So I told her we would definitely take time to look, and we would call out. And so we go on this walk, and we start down that trail. And of course they pick us up on each side of the bridge and we're walking in with, and we're walking down the trail. And this particular night felt very different. Felt like there was something energetic. There was like an energy there. There was something, you could tell something was going to happen. So as we're walking along, we start getting these whistles back and forth the trail from one end to the other, whistling back and forth. And it was so unreal to hear. It was like, wow. And we knew exactly what was doing the whistling. So we're wondering, okay, what are they doing now? Are they just making sure that we're not going too far? Or I know they're keeping an eye on us. So we're standing in the trail at this point, listening to the whistles back and forth. It stops, and we see these 2 really bright lights on the hill. Now, this is the hill that my wife and I was on the first. I'm thinking when I saw it, immediately I go, that's a flashlight. Somebody's in. Yeah. Now, who is back here this far with a flashlight? Unless maybe there is a kid lost and somebody's looking for the kid. So I kind of yell out. Nothing happened. It's just standing there. Well, after about 5 minutes, those lights that were on the hill starts coming down the hill. And as it got closer, we could hear it walking on 2 legs. Bright white lights started getting smaller and a little dimmer, and to the point to where it looked like 2 pin lights that you would hold up side by side. It wasn't one big bright light anymore. Bright lights. It was 2 little pin lights.
And how far away do you think they were from you?
When we first saw them, probably 100 yards. As it moved in closer and closer, it got to within 20 yards and stopped right across the creek on a hillside. And when it got that close and we could hear the bipedal walking, we could tell most definitely those lights were eyes. Bright, whitish yellow. They were side by side. They were stationary, and you could see every time he blinked. It was close enough that you could see him blink. There was the light on the eyes was bright enough to where there was a limb that covered part of his head. Step up and look over the limb, then he would look under the limb. And this was pretty significant because we went back over the very next day and measured that limb, and the limb was 10.5 feet. So we know he was about 10.5 feet tall.
Could you see an outline or anything of a figure, or just the eyes?
It was just the eyes. It was so dark that night. There was no moon, which a lot of people call it eye shine. Well, eye shine is something that's produced by light, and it's the eye, and it reflects back. This was not that. This was making. These eyes were making their own light. And this is the first time I've seen this to this. I've seen the eye shine before, but this was the first time I'd seen it like this. And this was mesmerizing. We all, every one of us, the 3 of us were standing up front, and the other 2 that was in the back, we were all watching it. And Jason decides he's going to do what he thinks is a greeting grunt. So he does this grunt noise, and he had heard others do. They had said these Bigfoot make these greeting sounds. So he does a really gruff that. And as soon as he did that, immediately those eyes that were, bright whitish yellow, deep orange red, like you would put on the tail, your brake lights would pop up. That's how bright they were.
Yeah.
And
Could have been a mating call.
I don't know what it was, but I started apologizing. When that happened, the whole mood changed, and you could tell that he didn't like that noise at all. So I started apologizing. Like, I'm sorry we did that. Please accept our apology, because I know this thing's pretty big just from where he's standing in that.
Yeah. Probably thought it was a challenge of some sort.
So he stood there after about a minute, after I apologized, and we all apologized and that. His eyes slowly went back to that whitish color, and he simply turned his head and walked back over the hill. And
Wow.
That was it.
And that was it, huh? Wow. And that's just amazing stories. I'm sure you probably have 100 amazing stories, Keith.
I've got some really good ones.
Good ones. Yeah. How do people get a hold of you in case they if they have more questions? Is there any way they can get in contact with you?
Sure, they can look me up on Facebook. I'm on there. Just explain where you in a PM who you are. If you heard the show and you want to talk to me, explain that there. I've got a big following there now, so just PM me and let me know, because I'm trying to weed through a few. I get some crazy.
Right, I'm sure. Yeah. So
I'd be more than happy to try to help anybody out or talk to.
well, that's fantastic. We'd love to have you on again in the future. Continue
Absolutely.
your stories and they're fascinating.
Because I haven't even gotten to the really good stuff.
So there we have it. An incredible eyewitness account of an amazing creature. Let us know what you thought. I like Keith's pro-life message there at the end. Forest Friends of the Night by Keith Bearden is available on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. And I cannot tell you enough how great it is, so go on and have a read. My dear friend Dave Dominguez has a great episode on this series asking how old humankind is really, and had we already been to the moon. It's worth a listen, go check it out. Our free digital magazine, the Paranormal Chronicles magazine, has many articles on the Bigfoot enigma, as well as dozens on cryptids, ghosts, UFOs, hauntings, spirituality, life after death, past lives, and so much more. So read your free digital magazine today at www.theparanormalchronicles.com/magazine. It's free, no sign up, no subscription, no nonsense, just free reading for you. So head over to www.theparanormalchronicles.com/magazine. Don't forget to follow our series for your chance to win amazing books in our monthly followers draw. It takes a second to follow, and every month you could win a book, so press follow now. It's crazy not to. I'm going to leave you with this. It's lyrics from the Bro Smith Bigfoot song. I think it's kind of apt for our discussion with Keith and Dave tonight. When the moon hangs high on the breast of the lake, and the bite of the wind is like a slap in the face, a giant of a creature all covered in hair, he's as tall as timber and strong as a beet. For hundreds of years the legend has grown about this big hairy man that walks all alone, a mountain monster 10 feet tall called Bigfoot. Sleep well.